Listening to London's 104.9 XFM, it is Exposure, and that was the Manic Street Preachers with There By the Grace of God, the last new recording we had from the Manics back in 2002 when the forever delayed Greatest Hits package came out. I'm John Kennedy, I'm here with you until 1, and I have James and Nicky from the Manic Street Preachers here tonight because it is another Exposure album playback. Welcome to XFM, how are you doing?
Fine, yes, good to be here.
Yeah. I'm going to stand up, actually, and move the microphone, because James is just a computer screen to me, and you're a telephone. And that's the way the studio seems to be set up. I thought
we've been called worse things than that.
Okay, that's good. Where should we begin? I mean, what we normally say is, when did you start thinking about a new record?
I think the thinking was important on this record. I think when we finished the Greatest Hits, we toured around the world, we ended in Tokyo, and we were left in a bit of limbo. And I think rather than just plough straight into songwriting, we did have to come up with a concept of reinvention. And the idea of elegiac pop music with an experimental edge, I guess, that was the theory behind things. It was my theory. I don't know about James's, but there was a theory behind this record.
So how long did it take to come up with that theory? I mean, did you spend a long time thinking of that, or just think, right, sitting on the toilet one day, that's it, elegiac pop, that's the new album?
I think it was just, the process was a wee bit more abstract than that, because I think before we could even start thinking about things like that, we had to release 2 compilations, the Greatest Hits and the B-Sides album. And I think that kind of helped us get things in perspective. It let us put things to bed, and all that kind of stuff. So I reckon, I don't know, I think we started writing songs around about a year and a half ago, perhaps.
Yeah.
Perhaps the oldest song. One of the oldest songs is 2 years old, but most of the songs were written about a year and a half ago.
Right, so I'm thinking 2002, is that right? Near the end of 2002?
I think the start of 2003.
Right, okay.
I think, the Greatest Hits and the B-Sides allowed us, really, you either split up after that kind of just getting rid of everything, or you reinvent yourselves, and we were left with a stark decision of trying to reinvent ourselves.
Was it a good process, looking back for Forever Delayed and Lipstick Traces? Was that fun?
I think it was essential. I don't think we'd be here now if we hadn't done it. It was the only way of putting everything into a coffin and leaving it all behind. It was just, it was it was very celebratory. I mean, going to places like Nagoya or Osaka in Japan and actually remembering fans from 10, 12 years ago who'd been to every single gig ever since. So it was a really nice feeling that whole year, but it just had to stop.
Yeah.
As opposed to a coffin, I prefer to think it as a time capsule in the Blue Peter Garden.
Does that illustrate the polarity in Manic Street Preachers?
It's just we've always just likened, looking over our past it's just like going through a photograph album. You're always going to find photos that look embarrassing, where you've got a terrible haircut, or you're wearing just silky white trousers. But kind of you just got to accept those mistakes, and you actually got to have a sense of humour about them. So I think by the time we'd finished doing all that, I think it was clear to us what we had to do. And that was, in that ironical sense, was that, we had to break our own rules and stop actually thinking too much in the studio. There would be certain tracks on the record where we do things, and in the past, our code of conduct would not allow us to do those things. And in a strange way, because we thought about it, we realised the answer was, just trust our instincts and don't ignore any of our feelings in the studio, and just get rid of the musical rules that we had.
Yeah. How does it go about with a new record? Do you stay at home and write songs there, or do you kind of get everybody together so you can write in the studio? What's best for Manic Street Preachers?
Basic format hasn't changed that much, in the sense that I'll just hand some lyrics to James via post or via human contact in London or in Wales. I still live in Wales. He'll come up with a basic tune, and we kind of take it from there, really, I think, Jim.
Yeah, I wouldn't call the tune basic, but...
Well, when you send me a tape on an acoustic guitar, sometimes it's basic.
Right, okay, so you come up with some lyrics, you hand them to James. James comes back with a bit of a tune bashed out.
It's not a bit of a tune, it's the tune. Jesus.
It's an artistic process. And then him and Sean will bash it out. I'll just sit in the back of the studio having a good time, and then they say, you got to play some bass now, and I'll go, oh, have I got to?
Is it as simple as that? So when you go into the studio, how worked out are all these songs?
I think you can just take examples from our past. Say a song like Design for Life. When Nicky gave me the lyric, I think it was 2 lyrics put into one, and then when the actual tune came, which was very quick, I think, I had all the ideas in my head, like the timpanis and the strings and everything. Of course, kind of like when we actually play the song for the first time, we'll all have individual ideas, but a song like that was pretty much fully formed as soon as it was written. Whereas a song like Nixon, the new single, we'd done a demo of that song, first of all, about a year and a half ago. And we knew we liked the song, but we just couldn't find a way to play it. And then one night when Nick was going home, he said, "Why don't you drag the Nixon file up?" And I did, and suddenly I found a template, kind of like I found something I could model it on, and suddenly the song came together. So that song was hanging around for a while, but it just didn't work out for a year or so. So you just got two examples there. One is very immediate, and it's almost like you have everything in your head, and then sometimes you've got to work at it.
Yeah. So when did you know that you were ready to start recording some of these songs that you'd started writing in 2003?
I think we did a batch with Solitude Sometimes, Cardiff Afterlife and Emily. We'd done a couple before that, but those were the three really that brought everything together. We did some demos in Cardiff, and everything was glistening, and everything was sharp, and everything was pure, and everything was getting, the kind of pop thing was coming through a bit, and everything was based on so much melody that I think that for me, those are the demos we give to Tony Visconti then, which he wanted to do, and for me, that Empty Souls we did as well, and that seemed the start of it, where we seemed to be on the right path.
Right. So when was that, when you were doing those demos in Cardiff?
That was last July, August, I think.
Right.
So it was about 15 months.
And then the next step was to go where? Because, you recorded the album in Cardiff, in New York, in Ireland. How did you make those decisions about where to go?
Well, I think we just... Again, we'd looked at the past, and we realised that kind of like when we were at a crucial kind of juncture before, we'd kind of gone and worked with a producer that we knew we could respect and kind of listen to. And, that was Mike Hedges, for Everything Must Go. And we just thought, we've always responded to that kind of elderly authority in the studio. And we'd nearly worked with Tony Visconti on Gold Against the Soul, our second album. I don't know, I think...
You're talking to piss off.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Easy word. Anyway. And it's kind of like, and we kind of, I think, we myself and Nick had been listening to a lot of Bowie, before this period, and we just kind of settled on him because he'd done some of our favourite records. And again, we just didn't want to go in the studio with some young producer who just want to go out whoring and taking coke all night and just put in a microphone through a dustbin lid and saying it's the greatest sound ever. We wanted somebody who had actually done amazing stuff and didn't want to impress us. He just wanted to work. Somebody we could trust. So kind of like I think that's what we settled upon him really. It just seemed to fit the bill to something that we always seem to respond to.
Really, Ashes to Ashes, I think, of Scary Monsters was one of the crucial records in terms of influence in the album. That idea of an amazing pop single, but it's a kind of lyric about an astronaut on smack. And you've got mums and dads singing along to Ashes after the Kenny Everett video show, and yet it's a really dark and disturbing lyric. And if we could match that experimental pop, reaching everyone but still being really subversive, and obviously Tony Visconti did that track. Yeah. It's kind of modern. It's futuristic, but it's still part of the past. It's just got everything we were after, that song.
But Tony didn't end up working on the whole of the album, did he?
Well, we went to New York for 4 weeks, and we did 4 tracks, 3 of which ended up on the album. And he was the catalyst, really, for the rest of the record to give us all our confidence back.
Again, he was the person that actually, like a David Carradine-esque kind of kung fu character, he actually taught us that the answer was 0. That kind of like, that we had to trust our instincts and we shouldn't go searching for the third or the fourth idea. We should trust our first idea, and by the time he'd actually kind of taught us a simple but essential lesson, he kind of put himself out of a job.
He did actually say at one point, "You guys know what you're doing."
He did. At the end of the session, we realised that things are going so well, and he went, "You know what? You guys can do this. You're just ready again." Just like then that phrase, kind of, "You're ready again." It was just like it's kind of cool.
It was also really expensive to go to New York for 4 weeks, work with Tony Visconti in a really nice studio and stay in the Soho Grand, which is what we did. So we got no complaints at all.
So you did that and then thought, right, back home. So the rest of the record, was that recorded in Cardiff, or you went to Ireland for a bit?
I think that the basis of the entire record really can place in Cardiff. This is why, although James doesn't like me saying it, I think it's got connections with the Holy Bible, that we went back to a cheap studio in Cardiff to kind of recreate our own world, to just hang out with each other more easily. Just the griminess of the studio in Cardiff, you know, reminded us of the Holy Bible as well, the cheapness of it all. And then the gloss we wanted to add on top. So I do think that the studio in Cardiff was essential to the whole process.
Right, and where did you add the gloss then at the end? Was that in Ireland?
Metropolis
with a mixer.
Yeah. Well, I think Tom Elmist, who mixed all the Goldfrapp stuff, and he mixed pretty much the entire record, and he definitely added a sheen, a metallic gloss that we've been searching for years. I mean, you played Grace of God earlier on, which I think is maybe a failed experiment, but it's very much a bridge. It's our first dabblings in trying to make something sound a bit modern. And I think we've fully realised it with this record. We just wanted to drag all our 80s influences into the 21st century. I think Tom helped a lot with that.
Yeah, I think listening to the record, it's kind of beguiling in that way, in that you listen to it first, and because it has that kind of sheen to it, it doesn't quite sink in, and yet the more you dig into it and the more you listen to the words, and the more you get out of it, particularly with the single, but we'll go into that in a bit. So elegiac pop is how you've described it, Nicky. What do you mean by that?
It's just the idea of something that's sad, that is a lament, that's melancholic, but it's actually comforting. It's not kind of truly depressing. It's the kind of idea that is full of the human spirit, but it's a very kind of honest and sad album.
And pop in the sense of being really, really catchy, the kind of thing that a milkman whistles down the road as he's doing his job, or...
I think it's the reclamation of pop. I think pop's become a filthy word, not just a dirty word. It has become an obscenity. And when we were growing up, just stuff would come on the radio, like a New Order track or a Cure track. You didn't really know the bands at the time, but they just crossed all genres. They were obviously a really alternative act, but they were just capable of 3.5 minutes of pop brilliance. And that seems to have disappeared now. Everything is very much in various compartments. So we just wanted, I think, that was Ashes to Ashes, again, a perfect example of something that's basically unbelievably weird, but can get a number one.
Bring on Dancing Horses, Fragments, just stuff like that.
Yeah. Blur the boundaries. And nurture a whole new generation of people like yourselves who'll be doing this in 20 years' time or something.
Well, pop has been taken over by the TV show, and, it just wasn't like that. Even, a Dancing Queen by ABBA, obviously, it still crosses every boundary. If you can make a record that inspiring, you shouldn't worry about who's listening to it.
Fair enough. Right, well, I think we should hear this album. The album is Lifeblood. We have Nicky and James from Manic Street Preachers. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back straight afterwards with the whole of their brand new album. Don't go away. You're listening to London's 104.9 XFM. It is Exposure. I'm John Kennedy, here with you until 1, and it is another Exposure album playback. That was the Manic Street Preachers, and the opening track to the brand new album Lifeblood. That was called 1985, and we have James and Nicky from the band with us tonight to tell us all about the record. Is 1985 a pivotal year in the history of the Manic Street Preachers, do you think?
Yeah, completely. It was the year we came together as 4 young people and formulated all our ideas, started listening to the same records, started watching the same films, reading the same things, looking the same way. It wasn't necessarily the year we started making music, but it was the year that we started creating our own world, the 4 of us. Everything seemed to come together very naturally in that year. We were 16, obviously, at the time.
And it was already the year, well, like Nick said, he gave a lyric to me for the first time. And it was already the year where we'd started debating things in our own peculiar way. Like, I remember saying that I like to give him enough rope by The Clash. And he just went on a massive, fierce counterattack saying it's shit, it's terrible. The first album is where everything starts and ends kind of thing. So we'd already started debating things, and I think developing the language we were going to speak in the next 20 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, James, Richey and Sean were very much the Bunnymen camp. I was the kind of Smiths camp at the time. You went to see the Bunnymen all the time. And
well, the Bunnymen it's hard to realise now, but they kind of were a pretty massive group at the time, really, really influential, the kind of group that you'd always see on the front of NME, and people don't talk about them, obviously, in the same way now.
No, I mean, I always remember on the cover of Smash Itch, McCulloch and Morrissey holding a bunch of daffodils, one of the greatest covers. That's what I mean, again, by that genre crossing pop, you just wouldn't get that now, I don't think.
Yeah. You're getting it a bit a bit with bands like Raise Light who've got on tour with you, and they're getting through into the top.
Oh, they're selling. I mean, I don't think it's down to sales. I just think it's a different kind of audience now. I don't think, Busted fans are buying Razor Light records.
Yeah. Well, maybe they're too young. Maybe when they're a bit older they might be. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, younger kids are buying records.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Morrissey does get a mention in the lyric. What's the mention about? Because I've been trying to decipher it, and I couldn't quite decipher it entirely.
Well, it says Morrissey and Mark gave us choice, and it was just the idea that Morrissey led me to a different world. He mentioned people like Oscar Wilde or James Dean, pretty obvious icons. But it's nice to be shown the way when you're 15 or 16. It just shows you an outside world.
In the anti-monarchy stance, he was the only person that actually, just shook off the unfashionability of talking about that again,
Yeah. And it's something you've always done with every single album. You've always mentioned loads of different things for people to get their teeth into and explore, which I've always thought was fantastic.
I think sometimes it's just nice to admit there's obviously people better than yourself. I mean, that's been the way behind it.
We've always had, I think we've always had quotes on our records because we've never been arrogant enough to actually think that we can just finish the sentence. Sometimes it takes somebody else's work to finish it all off, and that's quite a humble way of looking at things. I think it is the complete opposite of what people actually think we are sometimes. They think we're just willfully obscure sometimes and just a bit snobbish in terms of our references, and it's not that at all.
I think you're being really open, and people, writing them all down for people to see, so they can go and explore it for themselves.
Being open about our plagiarism.
Why not? The Love of Richard Nixon is the next track from Lifeblood. It was also the first single from the album. What's this song all about?
It's very complicated. It's a kind of three-line metaphor. The main metaphor of the record is the idea of being tarnished with something for your entire life, the way Nixon will always be tarnished with Watergate. That any good he ever did will never be, no one will remember it. And I think that goes for everyone in their personal life or their professional life. Some people are just going to remember Manic Street Preachers. Well, London cabbies are, especially for, is that nutter guitarist then? Has he turned up yet? You're always going to be remembered for certain...
It's Fidel call lately.
There's always going to be that side of it. I think it's in your personal life with your family, your friends, and it's just the song's trying to say we should always dig deeper, that Nixon's presidency, he did do some really good things like going to China, de-escalating the arms race for the Soviets. He was the first president to recognise cancer as a disease, I think, and he put a lot of money into trying to cure it. But no one's ever going to remember him for those things.
Until now, maybe.
We were on BBC Breakfast this morning, so we've reached the highbrow edge of morning television.
This is Manic Street Preachers with The Love of Richard Nixon on Exposure. That is the Manic Street Preachers with The Love of Richard Nixon from the new album Lifeblood, which is getting the Exposure album playback treatment tonight. We have James and Nicky from the band with us to talk us through it track by track. Empty Souls is the next song, and one of the things that really struck me about the album is the use of keyboards and pianos on it, which really adds another dimension. I'm sure you've used them before, but somehow it seems really key to the whole sound.
Yeah, I think
of this record.
You can reference what I was talking about earlier. When we actually realised that we had to start kind of breaking our own rules and our own code of conduct in the studio. That's when things started going well on this record. Just there are little things like, again, when I wrote the music, bit of a tune.
Basic tune.
Yeah. I had the piano part, but originally in my head it was on a guitar, the dun-dun-dun. And when we got to the studio, I just realised that it was going to be better on a piano rather than a guitar. And so I kind of had to put my kind of guitarist ego aside and realise that a lot of the guitar parts I had were going to be better on the keyboard. So I think that was, I had to kind of redesign my guitar playing and kind of, take the bluster out of it somewhat. So, again, it was all part of those little things, like, Nick plays kind of slap bass, dare I say it, on one of the tracks, and, instead of, slagging it off and saying that kind of remind us of Cameo or Level 42, we had to say, no, Ashes to Ashes, the slap bass on that. If we are cool, it'll be cool.
I think Empty Souls as well, I don't know if anyone remembers the Associates, but the piano sound is very Party Fears kind of, that great kind of 80s piano classic pop thing.
Yeah, no, well, I remember the Associates at least. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a key part of that. No, I think it really shines through on the record and makes a big, big difference. This is Empty Souls, Manic Street Preachers. Manic Street Preachers with Empty Souls from the new album Lifeblood. It is Exposure. It's another Exposure album playback. And Nicky and...
He's turned up.
Yeah, Richie's turned
Where
up.
Where you been?
It's amazing.
You look different. Show's your arm.
And Nicky and James are here with me tonight. A Song for Departure is the next song, and this, to me, has certain shades of Mamas and Papas, even, I thought, in the harmonies, which I thought was very nice. And I guess ABBA's been cited as one of the inspirations for the record. How did you do all these harmonies? Is that all you, James? Or
Yeah, it's kind of most of the harmonies myself, but like it says in the film A Bronx Tale, there's nothing worse than wasted talent, and Sean's kind of a brilliant singer, and usually takes myself and Nick about 3 days to persuade him to sing. So sometimes he's in there as well, which is good, because
I think Tony Visconti really helped with that, didn't he? He brought it out to Sean.
Yeah, he trusted him, kind of thing. But it's just, again, you know, when the song's written, they're usually there in our heads kind of thing straight away. You know, they're not something we work on, they're just something that's very immediate. And I used to sing in the school choir and stuff, so it's quite easy.
You're underselling yourself, you.
Do you have to multi-track? Because some of it, I mean, it sounds really...
Well, we did track the piano like 50 times, like ABBA was supposedly did, you know. But I think we only ended up using 2 tracks because it sounded shit. That's probably what they did.
The idea of it was kind of like that it was a West Coast song played in a very cold place. That was a band trying to be West Coast, but they couldn't escape their Northern European gloominess. Kind of thing.
I remember the first time you brought it and we played it in Cardiff and you said to Sean, drum it like Beat It by Michael Jackson, didn't you?
Yeah.
Dum, dum, dum. And then he said, you got to play bass like that as well, which is when I shit myself. But it took a lot of practice. It took a lot of work, I think, Song for Departure. It really paid off.
It did, yeah.
No, it sounds...
Proper studio song.
Yeah. And what's it actually about? What are the lyrics about?
It's inspired by a lovely female poet called Elizabeth Jennings. And it's just, like most of the album, dealing with death and departure and how facing it and realising how important it is and gigantic. It's a concurrent theme on the album.
Maybe we'll talk about that a bit more as we go on.
I'll try and avoid it.
This is A Song for Departure. You're listening to London's 104.9 XFM. That was A Song for Departure, the Manic Street Preachers from their brand new album Lifeblood, which is in the shops next week. But you get to hear the whole thing tonight with James and Nicky from the band, talking us through it track by track. It is an elegiac pop masterpiece. I think the critics can add the masterpiece bit, because you're too humble to add the masterpiece, I think. I Live to Fall Asleep is the next track. And even though... you mentioned that you had to kind of hold off some of the guitar work, James. I mean, there's some amazing kind of waterfall guitar on this. I've written down. Waterfall guitar. It's a technical term.
Again, it was just like a bit of a realization musically, because when Nick first gave me the lyric and I wrote the tune.
Basic tune.
The basic tune. My kind of instinct was that it should be as you hear it now, but we tried to push it in another direction. We tried to make it sound like orange juice, and it just sounded like, it just sounded like a bunch of 12-year-olds from Scunthorpe, trying to kind of like,
in a demo studio.
Trying to kind of like get themselves in a Battle of the Bands competition. It sounds really bad.
Didn't you say like a 12-year-olds in Newbridge Town Hall, I think you described it?
It was just awful. And I just realised that we had to trust our first ideas rather than go searching around for like the second or the third. And kind of, again, it was just, when I was playing the guitar on it, I just felt like a bit of a drip. Really. And kind of, I had to get my head around the fact that things could be beautiful and they didn't have to be strident, thrashing power chords, the thrashing power chords of James in Bradfield. And I had to get my head around being to be a bit more sensitive.
Well, I think it sounds great.
Cheers.
I like the sensitive side.
I think it's the purest pop moment on the entire record. I do think it's the most lush, gorgeous, sad little song I think we've ever done. I think it's so fully realised. The final mix was just, me and James both went in, it was just, you don't get many really sparklingly 100% amazing moments, but that was definitely one of them.
That's our manager's favourite as well. But his favourite band is the Bob Seger Bus Silver Bullet Band, so that doesn't stand for much.
And who is the you that is sung to in the song?
It's kind of two metaphor song again, and it's the one side of it is about suicide. Hooray! This deals with the idea, just that moment when people, if you actually have no joy in your life, I just find that unbelievably fascinating, because even when things are really bad, there's always 2 minutes a day or a minute a day that are kind of is enough to carry on. And when you reach that point of no return, it's just so unfathomable and despairing and scary. And there's also the idea of sleep being the only time that I feel like I rest my brain.
This is kind of strange, because it's the first time I haven't kind of like, you know, if I didn't know what a lyric was completely about, or if I thought I didn't understand it properly, I would always ask Nick, or in the past I'd ask Richey sometimes about references I didn't quite understand. But it was the first time that I didn't bother doing that. I just took a first impression and just, you know, started writing music. And I, you know, thought the lyric was about something quite different.
Having a kip.
No, I thought it was about, you know, the lyric was about that when you're young, you have a fascination with suicide, and you see it as kind of heroic, because, you know, there are a lot of music and bands and writers that you like when you're young that tell you that it's an heroic, brave act, but as you get older you realise that there is an inherent selfishness in the act as well, and, you know, you're more aware of the debris that it leaves behind. So that's what I thought the lyrics was about, but it was kind of wrong. But I think it's better. I think it's better that we've written songs like that, because, like I said, it's stopped over-cerebralising the process of, like, writing the songs.
Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, people interpret them however they want to interpret.
There's always going to be that side of it, you know. It's not a glory of suicide at all. It's actually it's an examination of how you reach that point of total despair. It's, like I said to you, even if it's walking my dog for 2 minutes on a bad day, still enough joy to keep you going.
Manic Street Preachers with I Live to Fall Asleep from the brand new album Lifeblood. It is Exposure. It's another Exposure album playback, and Nicky and James from the band are here with me tonight. Zed's Sanctuary, I think, is a great phrase, though, which I think people might take up and use in normal conversation.
Yeah, from the Mojo review, yeah. Very good. Very good review.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. To Repel Ghosts is the next song, which has some more cascading guitar work on it, James, maybe. And it's a bit of a rocker, really.
Yeah, it's a bit of a glider rock, I think. Call it. It's kind of it's wee bit of a name check for like 80s band called the Chameleons. It's a tiny bit of that in there for me. Kind of like
In Shreds was their big tune.
There you go.
Good lad, this boy. Doesn't look that old, does he?
Beyond the Comms and Angels next.
Hey,
China Crisis.
Don't get me started. Oh no, I didn't like that. And I saw them quite a few times, though. They seem to be supporting loads of bands I saw at one point.
King in a Catholic. What was the one? Catholic Block? That was
Black Man Ray and King in a Catholic.
Yeah. That was a good song.
They had some quite nice.
Another one of our man's favourite bands.
Yeah. Right, I kind of like, it was just, I don't know. I just got the lyric and I thought it was about survivor guilt. So I just wanted kind of like, I want the guitar to be a bit like, you know, something just piercing your consciousness all the time. But there you go. That's what I thought. Nick?
No, I mean, I think it was the description of autumnal, kind of glacier-like. I really like that idea. There's a bit of New Year's Day U2 in the chorus as well. The same piano effect, and you know, there's the lyrics were inspired by Basquiat, the New York painter. He had a painting called "To Repel Ghosts," and I just thought it was 3 words put together. Such an odd and such a strong phrase. I don't know, it's just really unusual. To Repel Ghosts. I've never heard a song title like that, and I don't know if it's as specific as James thinks. It's much more, it's like a lot of the album is about being haunted by ghosts and by your past and by your history, and trying feebly to escape the past, but to recognise it and learn from it.
This is it. To Repel Ghosts, the Manic Street Preachers, Exposure, XFM. We're halfway through. That was Emily, track 7 on the record, and you mentioned the Mojo review, so I'll mention it again, Nicky. The writer, James McNair, reckoned that this tied in with Emily Pankhurst, who was one of the people that you'd said you'd been reading in the great list that you presented, the media, which I thought was excellent, a list of films you've been watching, TV programmes, albums you've been listening to, books you've been reading, that kind of thing. Is it about Emily Pankhurst?
Yeah, it is. It's, you know, the song is not totally specific about her, but it's the idea that an icon of her stand-in, who really tried to do something good, who got women's suffrage and got women the vote, and that whole movement was so important, can be replaced by someone as obviously empty as Princess Diana, as a feminist icon. I mean, in the words, I'm spitting them out, to be honest, the fact that Princess Diana is seen as a feminist icon for doing absolutely nothing. And just the idea of, once again, not learning from history, and as someone as important as Emily Pankhurst has kind of been off the critical radar. So it's just that comparison, really. The culture we're in today just seems so much easier just to become, you become an ambassador for UNICEF for 6 months and you're seen as some kind of icon. It just seems pretty daft.
Yeah, where's the memorial park to Emily Pankhurst?
Well, exactly, yeah. Let's hope that they go in the works as well. You don't skid on as soon as you get
child friendly. It's got some great lines in there. It's what you forget that kills you.
Yeah,
I particularly like that idea, because I seem to be forgetting everything. And you can just imagine that it is what you forget that kills you, and that what you don't remember, and you've forgotten it, and then suddenly you realise if you'd remembered it, then.
Yeah, I think in an album that for us is our least political, I think that track is probably the most political, just in terms of, if you forget your past, you're completely doomed, personally, historically, in every sense. So I think that lyric sticks out more than the others for that reason.
And Tony Visconti produced the track.
Yeah, he did. I mean, again, as soon as we rehearsed it for the first time, I thought it was had a bit of a Bunnyman vibe to it, but it hasn't turned out like that at all, I don't think. But that was fair enough. Very constructive of me. But I remember that was kind of a shock with Tony Visconti, because we kind of played it, and we used to play in like a track for half a day, then recording it kind of thing, except for Know Your Enemy. And
half hour, wasn't it?
So, I just remember we played it like the third time or something, and he just turned around and went, "Yeah, that's great." I was like, no, let's play it again. No, that's great. Keep it like that. That's cool. And I was just like, it was a really scary moment of having to trust somebody else's judgment, and their his judgment was quite pragmatic sometimes, I think, kind of thing. But in the end, he was right. And I think that's what I was talking about earlier. You've got to trust somebody who's done so much good work, and and you've got to trust them, and you got to listen to their opinion.
Well, I think he was right. That was Emily from the new album. Glasnost is the next track from Lifeblood, a word that I hadn't read or heard of for, a decade or something, maybe longer. Openness, is that what it means?
Exactly.
Russian.
Yeah.
And it refers back to Mikhail Gorbachev and the new openness in Soviet society in the late 80s. Why use that word?
One, I think it's just a beautiful word. I think the Russian language is the most powerful and intoxicating in the world. Words like perestroika and glasnost, they just resonate with me right from the end of the 80s, really. But also is the idea of us opening up as a band, opening up to new ideas, getting rid of string sections and huge guitar solos. And just letting our albums have tended to be dominated by hatred and bitterness, and this album is for the first time has just got a more serene quality with, dare I say it, some love on it. And it's our idea of this is our personal Glasnost, really.
Glasnost, the new openness from the Manic Street Preachers from the new album Lifeblood, getting the Exposure album playback treatment tonight. I'm John Kennedy, here until 1, but with me are James and Nicky from the band. Always Never is the next track, and this to me is the most Bowie-esque of the tracks on the album. You've mentioned David Bowie quite a few times and Scary Monsters, and there's what can you tell us about Always Never?
That was the only song that was kind of written quite differently on this album. I think I had the tune before any words written, and that never really happens with us. I always write the music to the lyrics, and I just had a tune, and I kind of gave it to Nick with just just la-las on it and bar-bars and woof-woofs on it. and you wrote like lyrics to my kind of bits of rhubarb and stuff. So it's definitely the most stylized song on the album because of that. It was more of a musical experiment at the start than anything else. But this was when, we were rehearsing it for, about the 4th time or something, and Nick started kind of like playing like slap bass, like dong, dong, dong. You know, I thought he had a hard rock cafe leather jacket on for a second. But kind of like, but anyway, I could see him going through his mind that kind of perhaps it's not cool. And then it was cool, you know, because the song was nothing without him playing like that, and it affected the way Sean played and stuff, so.
I think Bowie for us really, in terms of our love, well, for me definitely 77 to 81, you know, post that and pre that, I can't say I'm a big fan really, but from Low through Heroes to Scary Monsters and The Lodger, those were the influences we were after, Sound and Vision and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, it's like the keyboard player that works with us, Nick Smith, he's been with us since 1996. That's kind of his finest moment in the album, kind of like so.
So you be nice to your mate spot.
Be nice to the mate spot.
The code of conduct that you've referred to, how long is this code of conduct? I mean, with this, you know, if slap bass was on the code of conduct that you mustn't, you know, a road that you never go down if you're in the Manic Street Preachers, that you've managed to embrace on this record, how long is the code of conduct, or is it all just in the mind, and there are certain things that you thrashed out over the years that you just wouldn't do?
I think we just, you know, being with each other for so long, because, you know, we've all grown up with each other and bought the same records and kind of like try to play, you know, the same games, whether it be football or cricket and stuff. Kind of like, I think we've just got a natural kind of subconscious checklist in our heads where we just won't go somewhere. We're almost too scared to do it in front of each other because we know somebody go, "What are you doing, you cretin?" kind of thing. And I think we just let go of that. We just let go of it. And, you know, of course, slap bass would be one of those things. What else would there be? Can you think of anything else?
Well, love songs. Love songs,
definitely. Floor toms, we're not too fussed on either, because it reminds him of stomping at the club foot and rockabilly music.
Right. Oh, there's a rockabilly revival on the way.
Oh, God help us.
This is Always Never. Manic Street Preachers on Exposure, XFM. And Solitude Sometimes is the next track, again produced by Tony Visconti. What can you tell us about this, about the words, Nicky?
Oh, it's one of my favourites, I got to say, from the minute we first did this. It took a long time to get right in the end, and Tom Elmhurst did do a lot of work in terms of deconstructing it and adding a lot to it in the final mix. But lyrically, it's just that idea that being on your own is brilliant. That in modern society we are forced to talk to people, we're forced to make friends, we're forced to chat to people. You know, I mean, the idea of a book club, why can't you read a book on your own? Why have you got to go around with 10 other people and tell them what you think of it? Why? I just do not understand this fascination with being with people.
But it's good to have an exchange of ideas.
Why, when you're dealing with fuckwits half the time?
But then you find your gang and talk about it with them, don't you? That's what you did.
You find your gang when you're 4 years old.
It's just this idea of the contrived, I don't know, when you contrived group of kind of exchanging ideas. It's alien to me. It's just, the idea is that solitude can be really positive. That, you know, you're meant to be a bit weird and odd if you're on your own. And it's not some of the greatest times I've ever had in my life of being on my own. And they still are. And it's great being with a band. It's great. I've been married 11 years and I got a lovely daughter. But I still can't deny that there's nothing sometimes better than being on your own.
Like Johnny Sachs says, what are we, the UN now?
It's just a beauty to it, which has been totally diminished. And it's that idea that, well, say the Smiths for me then, they made me feel less alone without having to touch and feel me. You just connected with something. And there's a poem by Louis MacNeice, which is kind of, I use in the song as well. So it's just, I know, it's just got the idea behind it is very dear to me.
Fragments is the next track. There's just two more tracks left. On Fragments, there are some additional lyrics by Patrick Jones, your brother Nicky.
Yeah.
I also looked at the website and saw the great film he's made for 1985.
Yeah.
Which I recommend highly. Manics, just manics.co.uk, isn't it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
They'll get it.
No, the film's great, and it's
It is. It's brilliant. You know, it's been really nice. I mean, obviously, I've always tempestuously got on with my brother, but all of a sudden he's just developed into just making these films all the time. He's done about 6 or 7 for the album, and it's just really nice to have it on the website. And we tried to put a lot of effort into the website this time. I don't know how to use the thing, but I just put all the content on.
Yeah. Well, I was really excited to look at it because it was like, oh wow, this is really good. And there's also the great footage of you when you were 16, I presume, when you just kind of formed as a group, and all sorts of other stuff, and it's really cool. So when you get additional lyrics by Patrick, do you call him up and say, I'm having a problem with the end of this line, can you help out? Is that how it works, or is it after a conversation he comes in with some words that he thinks you might be interested in?
With this particular track, Fragments, I thought it needed a bit of his blood-soaked misery, really, which is kind of what he writes about a lot. This constant battle between himself and modern society. And I just phoned him up and I gave him the words and said, could you, come up with a few lines, really? And he came up with pretty much half the lyric. And just really nice feeling, to be honest. I don't know if I even told James when we actually wrote it. It was one of the...
No.
But
I think Pat told me first.
I think it's a beautiful song. I think it's very restful and peaceful and somehow hopeful as well. I think it's, I don't know, it's just got a bit of sort of homecoming era U2 as well.
That's kind of strange because, the last 2 tracks of the album, Fragments and Cardiff Afterlife, are probably the 2 oldest songs, I think. So.
And is it slide guitar you're playing on this, James?
Yes, slide. It's a bottleneck on a dobro. Here we are. I've just done an interview for Guitarist Magazine. This is what I've turned into. I don't talk about kind of Russian films like Come and See, or
you can bring them up.
Peter Kropotkin anymore. I just talk about dobros, bottlenecks, and time signatures. I've become a musician.
When he did it, Jim did actually turn to me and went, "That's it. I sound like fucking Daniel Lanois now." Where's the hope? He said. But I think I know, it's just a beautiful song. I really love Fragments. It just makes me feel at ease with myself, which I don't think Manics records do that often, but I really do. It's restful.
That is Fragments, the Manic Street Preachers from the new album Lifeblood. It's in the shops next week, but tonight with Nicky and James. We've gone through the whole album apart from one track. Thanks a lot for coming in. I do appreciate it, and thanks for being so open. Cardiff Afterlife is the next song. What can you tell us about this?
Well, first of all, just this kind of lyric came at a different time because Nick was working on his private project, which was the Cities album.
As I tend to do.
Yeah, which is kind of like, which is just like, I think it was 10 lyrics about cities. And every lyric was on the back of a painting. And this is the only lyric that survived from that batch. And
you didn't actually write a song to any of them, did you? Except this one, you wanker.
Well, it's quite hard to write a tune to the Dublin Lag.
Tokyo Hole, I think.
Tokyo Hole.
Leeches over Havana.
Tokyo Hole was just degrading, to be honest. But kind of like, so that was the only song to kind of like survive from that batch. And it's I think it's the oldest song on the album, I think.
So where does it date back to, the Cities project? How old is the Cities
We were in Japan after On Know Your Enemy, I think, or maybe The Greatest Hits, I'm not sure, and I just started doing these. But James has a habit of losing lyrics, so I thought if I do them on these huge canvases, there's no way he's gonna lose these. I think he still might have lost one, actually.
I don't know.
But, so I just give him these stuff like Stockholm Alone, Tokyo Hole, Leeches over Havana. I think you've got to go. It's that idea of wastage. It's the idea that we do write songs which are just not up to it, and we've got to edit ourselves. The biggest mistake you can do as a band is just to release everything. That kind of Ryan Adams territory. I recorded a cover version in a hotel in Bahamas, and I'm releasing it as a single, even though it's absolute shit. And he's a really good songwriter, but he just shouldn't release so much. I've done the whole Strokes album. I'm releasing it on eBay.
Well, we did it on Know Your Enemy.
Yeah. But I think Cardiff Afterlife is very, very kind of, it reminds me of There Is a Light by the Smiths. It's about the reclamation of your memory, the purity of good things, the idea that you shouldn't let everything become apocryphal or mythical, that the whole Richey thing with us is the idea that, you know someone for 20 years. It's pretty much only the last 6 months that were dark and mental. Most of the time it was, creative, intense, or enjoyable, playing cricket or football. So it's that reclamation, the idea of not letting outside forces ruin stuff for you. I think you can apply it to more than just our situation. You know, the idea that Richey is a son to his parents and a friend to us. He's certainly not a guitarist. But, you know, he's someone I actually sat down on a desk and wrote lyrics with. I don't think many people have kind of had that experience in rock and roll, you know, saying that line's shit or that line's good and stuff like that. So it's very much a song about reclamation, I think.
Yeah, I just thought it was an attack. I thought it was kind of like, you know, an attack on revisionism. Basically, that's what I thought as well. So, you know, I always got to be more guarded because I tend to try and make Nick's lyrics more bitter than they actually are. So I'll just keep quiet.
I don't think it's been a problem with that in the past. It's just this time I tried to
rein me in.
No, rein myself in. I kind of all the bad stuff I put in a separate diary, and all the kind of constructive stuff I put into songs. James plays harmonica on this, which is also a very un-Manics thing to do.
Yeah, a very human thing to do.
Yeah, it's well placed though, doesn't it? After the first verse, the violins come in, and then the harmonica comes in after the second verse, something like that. It's a nice contrast.
Talk about the music a bit. Talk about sepia and stuff.
Hey, whatever happened to the strong and silent type like Gary Cooper?
There's some beautiful harp on this record too.
James, Taxi Driver. Chorus.
Yeah, no, kind of like I've been fucking prodded by Captain Wire. It's kind of when I wrote this tune. I modelled the choruses on Taxi Driver. You know, where kind of you have like the crescendos and the kind of like it's almost like backward horns and stuff like that, and the harp. And I just kind of wanted that kind of confusion because, you know, I think when we went through Lipstick Traces and Forever Delayed, you know, I think, you know, we'd kind of actually come through the mist, the fog of everybody else's opinions. You know, the fog and just mist of
war.
The fog of war, indeed. You know, just of everybody just actually just telling us, you know, what they actually thought the truth was and how we betrayed certain memories, which just couldn't be farther from the truth. And I just, you know, if in a metaphorical way musically, I wanted kind of like to come through the choruses, like in the Taxi Driver soundtrack, and it was almost as if you're just coming out of like some kind of like New York City mist into something.
It was a real magic. It was a magic moment because we went out for a walk in New York and we left Sean and Tony Visconti. We were struggling with the chorus a bit, weren't we?
Yeah.
And Sean just found a really good harp sample, and kind of Sean's bit of work actually, and he just got the actual soundtrack to Taxi Driver, played it to Tony Visconti, and we came back 2 hours later and it actually sounded like what we've been looking for.
Yeah, just because, you know, it's no accident that the very last note of the album is just coming out of that chorus. And like, you know, it is like a metaphor of just coming out of just like, you know, a bit of the kind of like the sadness and kind of confusion that surrounded certain things, and that's actually finding the answer for once, not having to look back for revenge against people.
And is that why? Because the song ends quite abruptly, doesn't it? Just kind of ends quite nicely.
Which means we're at peace with everything.
Indeed.
Excellent. Well, we'll leave you there. At peace with everything. James, Nicky, thanks a lot for coming in.
Cheers.
This is the last track from Lifeblood, Cardiff Afterlife.